The sound of crystal breaking can silence a room faster than a scream. One moment there's laughter, music, the clink of champagne flutes and the rustle of silk. The next moment, nothing.
Terribly sorry.
Just the echo of
Please forgive me.
glass
I
hitting
didn't mean for
marble
it to happen.
and a woman on her knees apologizing for existing. This is the story of that moment, of what happens when power forgets it's human, and of the stranger who reminded a room full of people that some things matter more than money. The Sovereign Hotel sits in the heart of Toronto's financial district like a crown jewel. 17 stories of marble and gold where politicians make deals, celebrities hide from cameras, and the truly wealthy gather when they want the world to remember who they are. On this particular October evening, the grand ballroom had been transformed into something that looked less like a party and more like a coronation. Every surface gleamed, every detail perfect. This wasn't just a celebration. This was a demonstration. Vivian Sterling had turned 30 that day, and she'd made certain everyone who mattered knew about it. The guest list read like a directory of power: CEOs, venture capitalists, politicians who answered phones at midnight. They'd all come to celebrate the woman who'd taken her father's struggling investment firm and turned it into Sterling Global, a billion-dollar empire built on precision, ruthlessness, and the complete absence of sentiment. Vivian had learned early that business was war by other means. Kindness was weakness. Empathy was liability. She'd crushed competitors who'd mistaken her youth for inexperience, her beauty for softness. Tonight, surrounded by people who feared her as much as they admired her, she stood exactly where she'd always wanted to be: untouchable. 20 feet away, near the kitchen doors, Claire Thompson was trying to remember to breathe. The tray in her hands held 12 crystal wine glasses, each one filled to the exact level the event manager had demonstrated that morning. Her arms burned, her feet ached in the borrowed heels that were half a size too small, but she couldn't afford to notice the pain. She'd been working at the Sovereign for 8 months, picking up every shift she could fit around her daughter's school schedule. The base pay barely covered rent on their one-bedroom apartment in Scarborough. But nights like this, events where Toronto's elite gathered and tipped in hundreds instead of tens, these were the nights that meant she could keep the lights on. These were the nights that meant her 6-year-old daughter didn't have to know how close they lived to the edge.
Claire was 26. She'd been raising her daughter alone since her ex-husband walked out 2 years ago, leaving nothing but debt and a note on the kitchen counter that said he'd never wanted to be a father anyway. Every single day since then had been a negotiation with survival, every choice measured against what it would cost. She'd learned to make herself invisible, to move through rooms like smoke, present but unnoticed. It was safer that way, safer to be the person who served the wine than the person who drank it. James Calloway hadn't wanted to come. He'd spent the day at a construction site in Etobicoke reviewing structural plans for a community center his company was building. He was more comfortable in work boots than dress shoes, more at ease with blueprints than business cards. But his father, William Calloway, had called from the hospital that afternoon, the same hospital where he was recovering from a heart attack that had nearly killed him 3 weeks earlier. "You need to go in my place, son. Vivian Sterling is one of our key partners. Show your face, represent the family." So James had come, standing quietly in a room full of people discussing portfolios and mergers, counting the minutes until he could leave with dignity and tact. The physics of rooms like this are simple. Power occupies the center. Everything else orbits around it. Claire understood this instinctively as she moved along the perimeter, offering wine to guests who took glasses without acknowledging her existence. She'd served at dozens of events like this. She knew the rules. Don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Don't interrupt conversations. Don't, under any circumstances, make yourself memorable. But the tray was heavier than usual. Her right shoulder had been aching since the morning shift, and she'd been on her feet for 11 hours straight. She approached the center of the room, where Vivian stood, surrounded by investors in suits worth more than Claire's annual salary. The event manager had been explicit that morning. Miss Sterling and her inner circle were to be served first, always.
Claire waited at the edge of the group, tray extended, until Vivian glanced in her direction and gestured for the investors to take glasses. They did, without a word of thanks, without even looking at her face. 4 glasses left on the tray. Claire felt the weight shift. She started to step back, already looking toward the kitchen doors, already thinking about the moment she could set the tray down and rest her arms. It wasn't dramatic, no grand stumble, just her heel catching on the nearly invisible seam where 2 sections of marble met. Her ankle rolled, her body tried to compensate automatically, her hands jerked upward, trying to steady the tray. 3 glasses stayed balanced, the 4th tipped, rolled, and fell. The sound when it hit was like a gunshot, crystal shattering against marble, red wine spreading across white stone. The music from the string quartet suddenly too loud, every conversation in the room stopping mid-sentence, heads turning in unison like synchronized dancers. Claire dropped to her knees instantly, reaching for the broken pieces. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'll clean this right away." The words came automatically, a reflex born from years of apologizing for taking up space, for making mistakes, for existing in rooms where she didn't belong. But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of the silence around her, felt the hundreds of eyes watching, and felt, most of all, the presence of Vivian Sterling standing over her like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Don't touch it," Vivian's voice cut through the silence. Not loud, she didn't need to be loud. Authority has its own volume. Claire looked up, her hands hovering over the broken glass. Vivian took a step closer. "Do you have any idea how much those glasses cost?" The question hung in the air. Claire kept her eyes down. "I'm very sorry, Miss Sterling. It was an accident. The floor." "The floor," Vivian repeated slowly, "was an accident." She looked at the crowd, then back at Claire. "You were hired to do one job, carry a tray, serve drinks, and you can't even do that without destroying property and disrupting my event?" The words landed like blows. Claire felt her chest tighten, her breath coming shallow. She wanted to explain, wanted to say that the tray had been too heavy, that she'd been working double shifts all week, that the heel had caught on the seam in the floor. But the words stuck in her throat. All she could do was kneel there, feeling smaller with every passing second. And Vivian, sensing weakness the way predators sense blood, continued. "This is what happens when standards are lowered, when people who clearly lack the competence or professionalism required for this environment are hired anyway."
No one moved. No one spoke. The unspoken rule was absolute. Vivian Sterling was not someone you challenged, not if you valued your career, your reputation, your place in the circles that mattered. She'd destroyed bigger people than a waitress over smaller offenses. A broken wine glass was nothing. A humiliated employee was less than nothing. Vivian looked down at Claire with something that might have been satisfaction. "You're clumsy, you're careless, and frankly, you're wasting everyone's time. You're replaceable. Do you understand that? There are 100 people who would take your position without hesitation. You're nothing." Vivian's voice was colder now, clinical, final. "You will always be nothing." The words echoed in the silence, and in that moment, Claire felt something inside her shatter more completely than the glass on the floor. She felt every fear she'd carried for the past 2 years crystallize into certainty. That she wasn't good enough, that she'd never be good enough, that she was exactly what Vivian said, nothing. But across the room, James Calloway had heard every word. He'd watched the young woman drop to her knees, watched Vivian stand over her like a prosecutor delivering a verdict, watched people in $10,000 suits look away, suddenly fascinated by the ceiling architecture. And he felt something inside him that he hadn't felt in a long time. His mother's voice, as clear as if she were standing beside him. The measure of a person isn't what they do when everyone's watching, it's what they do when everyone's looking away. His father had called him that morning from a hospital bed, asking him to represent the family, to maintain the partnership with Sterling Global, to be diplomatic, to be smart. But as James looked at Claire kneeling on the marble, shoulders shaking, he realized that some things mattered more than partnerships.
Some moments required you to choose between comfort and conscience. And his parents hadn't raised him to be the kind of man who looked away. "That's enough." His voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. The room turned. Vivian looked up, surprise flickering across her controlled expression. For a moment, no one moved. Then James spoke again, quieter, but somehow more final. "She made a mistake. She apologized. And what you're doing right now isn't about the glass. It's about making yourself feel powerful by making someone else feel small." "Excuse me?" Vivian's voice carried a warning. "This is my event. This is my hotel, and I don't recall asking for your input on how I manage my staff." James met her eyes. "I'm William Calloway's son, and I'm telling you, as someone whose family has done business with you for 3 years, that what you're doing right now is cruel, it's unnecessary, and it's beneath anyone who claims to be a leader." The ballroom was utterly silent now. This wasn't just a broken glass anymore. This was a challenge, a public confrontation between the most feared woman in Toronto's business world and a man who, by all appearances, had nothing to lose. Vivian's smile was razor-sharp. "Your father would be disappointed to hear you've decided to throw away years of partnership over a waitress and a wine glass." "My father," James said quietly, "spent 40 years building a company based on respect, based on treating people like human beings, regardless of their position or power. And if standing up for someone who's being publicly humiliated means losing your partnership, then we never had the same values to begin with." For a long moment, Vivian said nothing. She looked at James, then at Claire, still kneeling on the floor, then at the crowd of investors and executives watching the scene unfold. And for the first time in years, Vivian Sterling felt the ground shift beneath her. Because James Calloway had done something no one else in that room had been willing to do. He'd made her cruelty visible. He'd transformed her private moment of power into a public display of character. And everyone in the room was watching which version of herself she would choose. She turned without another word, her heels clicking against marble as she walked toward a private corner where her closest advisors waited. The message was clear. The conversation was over, but the damage was done. The investors followed her, but James noticed they didn't meet her eyes. The other guests slowly resumed their conversations, but the energy in the room had fundamentally shifted. Something had broken that couldn't be fixed with another glass of champagne.
James turned to Claire, who was still on her knees, tears streaming down her face, looking smaller than anyone should ever have to feel. He knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" Claire shook her head, unable to speak. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. James glanced at the broken glass, then back at her face. "This wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." "But you," Claire's voice broke, "you stood up for me. And now, everything you said about the partnership, about your father's company, I heard what she said. I heard what you risked." She looked toward Vivian across the room. "All of it ruined because of me." James helped her to her feet, his grip steady. "I didn't stand up for you because I thought it would be easy. I did it because it was right. And nothing's ruined. The only thing that gets ruined is when we forget what matters, when we let power make us cruel." James walked her out of the ballroom, past the crowd that parted silently, past the string quartet that had started playing again, past the pretense that nothing had happened. In the lobby, he called her a taxi and made sure she had enough money to get home safely. And as they stood in that quiet space between the party and the rest of the world, Claire finally found words. "I don't know why you did that," Claire whispered. "You don't even know me." James looked at her with an expression that made Claire want to cry all over again, but for different reasons. "My mother worked as a housekeeper before she met my father. She spent years being treated like she was invisible, like she didn't matter." He paused, looking back toward the ballroom. "I watched my father stand up for her every single time, even when it cost him.
He taught me that power isn't about what you can get away with. It's about what you choose to do when no one can stop you. The taxi honked once. Claire looked at the car, then back at James. She wanted to say something profound, something that would capture how much this moment mattered, but all she could manage was the simplest truth. "You're a good person, Mr. Calloway." James shook his head. "I'm just someone who had the privilege of standing up when it mattered. You would have done the same for someone else." He held the door open for her. "Go home to your daughter. Hug her. Tell her you love her. And don't let tonight make you feel small. You're not small. You never were."
As the taxi pulled away, James watched until the taillights disappeared into the river of city traffic. Then he turned back toward the hotel, thinking about his father in the hospital, who had spent 40 years building relationships based on respect. Thinking about the people inside who had witnessed everything and would carry this story forward. Thinking about how one moment of choosing conscience over comfort could change the trajectory of everything. Inside the ballroom, the party was trying to recover. Conversations resumed. Glasses were refilled. The string quartet played on. But something fundamental had shifted, because Vivian Sterling had learned, in front of everyone who mattered, that all the power and money in the world couldn't protect you from the consequences of forgetting that every person deserved dignity. The broken glass would be swept away. The wine would be cleaned from the marble. By tomorrow, the grand ballroom would host another event, another gathering of power and wealth. But the people who had been in that room tonight would carry something else with them. A memory, a moment, a choice. James sat in his car and called his father. The phone rang twice before William Calloway's tired voice answered. "How was the party?" James took a breath. "Dad, I need to tell you what happened, and I need you to know I'd do it again." As he spoke, recounting the evening, he heard his father's breathing change, heard the pause that meant William was processing, considering, and then, finally, his father's response. "Your mother would have been proud." Across the city, Claire paid the taxi driver and climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, the babysitter was watching TV while her daughter slept. Claire paid her, thanked her, and locked the door. Then she stood in the hallway outside her daughter's room, watching the small form under the blanket, listening to the sound of peaceful breathing. And for the first time that night, Claire let herself cry. Not tears of shame, not tears of humiliation, but tears of something closer to relief. Her daughter shifted in sleep, murmuring something inaudible. Claire stepped into the room, adjusted the blanket, kissed her forehead. And in that moment she made a promise, that she would never again believe the lie Vivian Sterling had tried to make her swallow, that she was nothing, that she would always be nothing, because James Calloway, a stranger, had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, and that meant it was real. The city continued its rhythm, lights in windows, cars on highways, people living their lives, carrying their stories. And somewhere in that vast network of human experience, 3 people went to sleep that night changed by what had happened in a ballroom at the Sovereign Hotel. Vivian Sterling, lying awake, feeling for the first time the weight of consequences. James Calloway, at peace with his choice, and Claire Thompson, holding her daughter close, understanding that dignity isn't given by the powerful, it's claimed by the brave. The chandelier lights dimmed, the staff cleaned, the night ended, but the story didn't. Because some moments don't end when the lights go out. They echo forward, rippling through choices and conversations and the quiet decisions people make about who they want to be. This is what happened when one woman forgot that cruelty has a cost, when one man remembered that courage has a purpose, and when one broken glass became the moment that shattered the illusion that power and worth were the same thing. They say you can tell everything you need to know about a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them.
In a ballroom in Toronto, on a night when the powerful gathered to celebrate themselves, that truth became impossible to ignore, and 3 lives were forever changed by the weight of glass, the sound of shattering, and the choice to stand when everyone else looked away.
For more videos, please subscribe, like, and comment.